Okay, B'Shem Hashem Na'aseh V'Natziach. We're doing the Sichat Musar on the mitzvah of Talmud Torah. We're learning here in Project Seed the sugya of Talmud Torah, and Rav Weinberg Zatzal was once giving a shir on the mitzvah of Talmud Torah, and he said something that he had also learned from his father-in-law, Rav Ruderman, and that is that we don't just learn Torah just to get mental and intellectual satisfaction. Of course, there's a famous Orach Chaim HaKadosh that says if people would be in tune with their neshama, they wouldn't go after the nonsense of the world like a Baltimore Orioles or the NBA Finals now. They would run after learning Torah like metal goes after a magnet, because everything else, boz yabuzulo, all the other luxuries and pleasures and money of the world is nonsense and literally hevel varik compared to the pleasure in learning Torah. But everything in life has a goal, and there's a goal when we learn Torah, and the goal is that we have to try to the mitzvah of Talmud Torah is to try to learn Torah, Kola Torah Kula, which means the Rambam says this very clearly in his Hakdama to the Mishnah Torah. We have a mitzvah to carry out all the Taryag mitzvot. Now it's Na'aseh V'Nishma. It's kind of impossible to know all the mitzvahs of the Torah to carry them out if you don't learn about it. So therefore, the mitzvah of Talmud Torah is not just we learn it because it's interesting or fun or gishmak, which it is definitely, but there's a goal. The ultimate goal is that we have to learn the details of all the mitzvahs of the Torah, which is Kol Torah Kula. Now the Rambam says you could do that by learning my Sefer Mishnah Torah. Nowadays, since we don't necessarily paskin like the Rambam, you could learn the two, like we said yesterday, one has to learn Ibay the Hilchasa, so you know how Lamaisa to carry out all the, whatever we learn is not like the people that go to Kabbalah Center, Lahav the Lefte Avdalah's Madana. It's just interesting stuff. When we learn Torah, we have to, it's Al Minas Lasos, right? Whatever we learn, we have to incorporate, and with the utmost fear of heaven, conduct our lives according to the Torah. That's why Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky says the first thing we learn, the first Gemara that we learn, or Mishnayos we learn with the young children, is what? Ela Mitzius, to teach us that we don't hold like the Goyim, finders keepers. You get what I'm saying? One has to respect people's private property, and to know that one has to be honest and erlich, because the Torah is the Torah of Chaim. Every second of our lives, it's our guiding GPS how to act. Every second of a life, we have to make a decision to go right, left, and we have to base our decisions on Da'at Torah, or the Ashkenazim say Das Torah, and we can only do that when the more Torah we know, the more we know how to base our decisions off the Torah. So there's definitely a clear goal when one learns, and that is to finish Kol Torah Kula. So the Rambam says, if you learn my Sefer, you could accomplish that. Now, unfortunately, we don't paskin like the Rambam. One needs to learn the Shulchan Aruch, and you can't understand the Shulchan Aruch without learning all the Tur Beis Yosef, and you can't understand the entire Tur Beis Yosef unless you learn all the Shas. So it essentially becomes a three-pronged thing. One has to learn Shas, and the Rishonim then see which Rishonim are the basis of halacha, and then one sees which Rishonim we paskin like. Now Rosh Hashiva Zatzal Rav Weinberg said, if it's too complicated to go through an entire Tur Beis Yosef, one can learn the Aruch HaShulchan, because the Aruch HaShulchan is bringing down all the Rishonim, and he also brings down La'alacha L'maisa what to do, because the Mishnah Berurah, as wonderful as it is, it doesn't go on Choshen Mishpat and Even Ezer and Yoredeya and all the sugyas over there. But that's actually what Rabbi Yisrael Salanter says. Rabbi Yisrael Salanter says that in his opinion, the biggest mistake the Shulchan Aruch made was that he made it 4 halakim. So people get this misunderstanding that if they learn Orach Chaim, they've done everything, which is wrong. There's sugyas in Yoredeya, like one of the mitzvahs that I was with Rav Chaim Kanievsky a few times, and I sent a lot of people to him that didn't have children. Rav Chaim very much recommends people that don't have children to do the mitzvah of Shiluach HaKan, but that has a whole Shulchan Aruch to it, how to do it. And like Rav Shlomo Zalman used to tell everybody, one should do it at night, because practically speaking, the father sits on the children during the day. But there's many mitzvahs of Shatnez and all the sugyas of Yoredeya, the sugya of Kibud Avayim and all of these. So, like Rav Shach Zatzal said, the goal in our life, we have to have a lifetime goal. And I always say, you're as great as your goals are. Your she'ifos. That's what Rav Ruderman, Rav Kasman, one of the great Rebbeim in the yeshiva, he would say that there was a fervent Kinas Sofrim, that when people would finish Shas, and actually it's very important that should be the goal. Like Rav Shach Zatzal said, it's not only Shas, it's Shas that's interpreted into the halachic Tur Beis Yosef and the Shulchan Aruch, and it's very important that one has that lifetime goal, because if you 50 times learn again Meseches Bava Kama, but you didn't finish Shas and Shulchan Aruch, you've missed your goal of your life. The goal of life is to be able to carry out all the mitzvahs of the Torah, and you can't do that if you haven't studied. So it's but I wanted to take it a step further from what the Ashkenazim say, and because I had a whole discussion with Rav Yaakov Hillel Shlita, Hagoyna Mekubo. He says that in Hilchos Talmud Torah, the Balatanya, which has a wonderful Shulchan Aruch Harav, has a beautiful. Maybe we should go through it if we have time tomorrow, or on Sunday or Monday. You guys are leaving, but he brings there from the Mekubalim a very, very scary thing. He brings from the Arizal, the Balatanya, that there's 4 ways to understand the Torah, right? Pardes, Pshat, Remez, Drash, Sod. And he says it's brought down based on the Zohar HaKodesh that each neshama has a certain chelik in Torah, right? That's what we say at the end of davening, V'tein chelkeinu b'Toratecha, which means each neshama has a certain hasaga, how much he could understand Hashem, because that's ultimately why the grandest and most powerful of all the mitzvahs is Talmud Torah, because that's the deepest manifestation that we understand Hashem, right? It says in the Torah that man knew his wife. When man had intimacy with his wife, in the Torah, it calls it in the lashon of knowing, because the deepest relationship you could have with somebody is to know them, right? To know what they love, to know what they're all about. So if we want to have the deepest connection to Hashem, is to know what he loves. How do we know what he loves and what's important to him? Through his Torah. So, make no mistake, Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam is because that's the deepest manifestation of our relationship to Hashem, to know what he's all about. Now, he brings over there B'Shem the Arizal, the Balatanya, the Shulchan Aruch Harav, that each neshama has a potential of understanding these 4 levels of Torah. The simple meaning, the pshat, the remez, the gematrias, the drash, like the midrash and the lessons, and then the sod, the Kabbalah. He says that if a neshama doesn't get to its full potential, it has to keep on becoming Gilgul, reincarnated, until it's Hashem is going to start recycling and bringing the neshama again and again and again in the world until it gets to its full potential of understanding its most ultimate, deepest understanding of the Torah on those 4 different levels. So this brings me to the second part of the shir, which is sad. I was once in Baltimore sitting next to one of the most prominent doctors, who happened to be a Talmid Chacham, and he was all worried about, I said, so do you learn any Kabbalah? Do you learn any Zohar? Baruch Hashem, Rav Nachum is very into Kabbalah, but he said, no, he was worried. But people don't realize, like, the Nefesh HaChaim is all about Kabbalah, and the Grazal, Rav Eliyahu Vilna, has more literature on he's written more on Kabbalistic subjects. He has a Pirush on the Zohar, and the Sefer Yetzirah, and many other things, and in all his Pirushim on Tanakh, he alludes to a lot of very deep Kabbalistic ideas, which obviously we want to. Obviously, somebody that doesn't know Shas and Poskim, you don't go to PhD level stuff if you don't know the ABCs. The ABCs is to know all the basic Shas and Poskim and Halachos and Mishnah Berurah and like the Shulchan Aruch, like we said in the beginning. But the ultimate goal of a Jew, if he wants to have the deepest relationship with Hashem, and if he doesn't want to have to become Gilgul, reincarnated, he just doesn't have to finish the Torah on the Pshat, on the Nigle, which is the revealed part, but it's very clear from the Arizal that if your neshama had the potential of understanding the Torah on its mystical and Kabbalistic levels, and you didn't learn it, you're going to have to come back in the world again and again till your neshama is able to be masig, to understand and attain those levels of understanding. So, in a way, one of the greatest things that came about in the last 100 years was the Daf Yomi, because the reason the Chafetz Chaim, there's a story behind the Daf Yomi. When Rab Meir Lublin came up with the idea, he was under 20 years old. He told the Chafetz Chaim he has this amazing idea that everybody in the world should be holding on the same daf. The Chafetz Chaim said, I love this idea. And one of the reasons the Chafetz Chaim loved the idea is because he held that the Chafetz Chaim very much also held of this idea that it's important to know Kol HaTorah Kula, right? We can't just learn the parts of the Torah that we necessarily like. Like, we have to, the Torah is one entity, it's one body. We can't just get to know the parts of it that are convenient and nice to us, but we have the mitzvah of Talmud Torah, which we're learning, the goal is to know all of it, right? That's why the Rambam, again, I'll say it for the 10th time, said Mishnah Torah. He says, come learn my Mishnah Torah, you'll know Kol HaTorah Kula. And that's what the Rosh Hashiva Rav Weinberg also explained. He said, people think the Torah is unlimited. That's not true. The Pilpulim and the Svaras of Torah are unlimited. But the Halachas of Torah, to know what it's all about, is limited. The Rambam says, if you learn my Mishnah Torah, you'll know Kol HaTorah Kula. So, what I'm trying to say is that the goal always has to be that the Daf Yomi was able to bring this out, that people go through entire Shas. Like, Baruch Hashem, I've done it on and off, 2-3 cycles. I finished Shas. I'm close to finishing the second time. It's an amazing thing, exactly for we're not only talking to elitist, people that are, obviously, if one can finish Shas Be'iyun, and with all the Rishonim and the Tur Bes Yosef, and then combine those two worlds of halacha and Shas together, that's the real way to learn, like we explained yesterday. But for the average balabas, I could guarantee you, through my, I asked a few dozen people. A lot of people are not going to go learn a lot of the Eruvin or Nida or a lot of these Masechtas that are very, very difficult. And that's one of the great things of Daf Yomi. I mean, Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky, when I was learning the Mir, one of my chavrusas was a Talmud Mukha, Rav Yaakov. Rav Yaakov said, for our generation, it's too hard to do Daf Yomi and actually know it and chazer it. So Rav Yankiv very much held of Amud Yomi. It'll take double the time, but like the Gra writes in Evan Shlomo, it's better one Masechta B'Kavana with a lot of Masechta Shelo B'Kavana. Let's not make a mistake. The goal is to know, like Rav Chaim Kanievsky, when he gave his bracha to the Siyam HaShas last year, he says the mitzvah is not just to go through Shas, but to know Shas. That's why we need to chazer. But whether you learn Daf Yomi and are able to chazer it, or learn Amud Yomi, which I would love to start giving a shir on that, because it's actually more, you're able to chazer it and you're able to learn the Rosh. It's much, much more. Chazal teach us that unless you chazer something 4 times, you never even learned it from the 5th time. The Stipler has a beautiful shmooze on that based on the Gemara in Eruvin, that Moshe Rabbeinu taught something 4 times, then the 5th time he taught it to Klal Yisrael. First he was taught by Hashem, then he taught it to Aaron, then Nadav and Avihu, then the Shivim Zakenim, right? Then he taught it to Klal Yisrael. So really, if we don't learn something 4 times, it's not even considered like we even learned it. From the 5th time, our understanding of it is superficial. But whether you want to do Daf Yomi or Amud Yomi, that's one of the glorious things of that thing, that you have a regimen where you try to finish Kol Torah Kula. Because like my Rebbe, Reb Tzvi, I told him I wanted to give him a Siyam HaShas. When I learned Sanhedrin in the last cycle, he told me that you shouldn't give it yet. Rav Ruderman held that you have to finish all Mishnayos also. Because Shas stands for what? Shishet Sidri. And the Bavli is only on what? 4 Masechtas of Shas. So it's very important that one should have a Seder to finish all Mishnayos. If one wants to finish Kol Torah Kula, part of that is also Zohar. Basically, this is also very important to understand. If your goal is just to be Yotze Zayin the Daf, and my brother-in-law has a lot of problem with a lot of people. He's asked over 50 people that are his students, okay, today's Daf, you learned it, well, now do you know anything of it? That's a shame. That on one hand, I very much like the Daf Yomi because people are able to finish all the Shas, which we were trying to talk about, but it may be more wise for there to be a greater emphasis on Amud Yomi and Chazara. It becomes extremely, extremely difficult to chazer the Daf Yomi. One has to realize that the goal is not to just go through the Daf Yomi, it goes in one ear, goes out the other, but actually to retain it. So the Grazal holds the main way to learn Shas is to actually learn the Rif. One of the best ways to actually remember your Daf is to go through the Rif. I did it in one of the cycles. It only takes 5 to 10 minutes, and if one chaz is that, one is able to know the shakli avatarias of Shas. That is, in the time of the Ran, people used to actually not learn Shas. They would just learn the Alfasi. That's why the Ran wrote his Pirush, his main Pirush on his Chidushei Haran on the Alfasi, because they held they didn't have enough time to go through all the pilpul stuff. But definitely, Rav Yitzchak Yosef was saying, to truly understand Shas in its deepest level, one should also learn the Rashi and the Tosfos. So there's no time to waste to be able to go through Shas with all the Rashi and Tosfos. If one doesn't have Tosfos, the Maharal writes that one could learn the Rosh, because the Rosh has the added mila that he brings the halachic stuff down. But once one understands that there's so much to learn and so much to chazer, just going to a 1 hour shir of Daf Yomi is a wonderful thing, but the ultimate goal is that one should, and that will be a shmooze for another time, the importance of chazara. They also parenthetically told Rav Chaim Kanyanevsky what's the right way of writing Shas. I happened to be in his office, and they wrote a new Pirush, new set of Yerushalmi came. He said the right way to learn Shas Bavli is also to learn concurrently Yerushalmi. A lot of times in the Rambam paskins al pi the Yerushalmi. There's a lot of different issues. Right now is the 3 weeks. The idea that we don't have meat for the 9 days is based on the Yerushalmi. A lot of things that we do halachically, people don't understand, is based on the Yerushalmi. So there's, to summarize, ultimately speaking, the Torah is unlimited, but our chiyuv to study it has a limit to it. And the Rosh Hashiva Zatzal said, practically speaking, that would be the Aruch HaShulchan. And may Hashem help us to not waste time, because there's so much to learn. There's the Bavli, Yerushalmi, Sifra, Sifri, all of the Midrashim, which Rav Shach, I heard from one of the Talmidim, Rav Shach, he was upset that people had abandoned learning the Midrashim, which is Chazal, and the Yalkut Shimoni, which has such deep Divrei Elokim Chaim lessons that we can inculcate and incorporate into our lives. And if you don't learn Zohar, you're going to have to become, if you don't learn the hidden parts of Torah, I have bad news for you. You're going to have to become reincarnated. That's a part of Torah that we could not forsake. Everybody holds this. The Sephardim for sure were obsessed with Kabbalah. The Rav Yaakov Hillel Shlita told me that the Minchas Elazar has a whole tshuva on it, how he writes that the right way to learn. And the Grazal was obsessed with Kabbalah. He has more of his literature that he wrote on is on Kabbalah more than anything else. So Hashem should help us, V'ten chelkeinu b'toratecha, to get to our portion in Torah. Amen. Ken Yiratzon.